All right, so starting off here, my name's Sierra Hylton, and I'm South Carolina's AdoptaStream Program Coordinator. I'm located in Columbia at DHEC's central office, and I'm excited to tell you all about macroinvertebrates today. The goal of this webinar is, one, if you're already a certified volunteer with our program, I'd love for you to learn something new, maybe an advanced fact or two, and then if you have no idea what a macroinvertebrate even is, we'll also be introducing them to you and hopefully convincing you that they are pretty cool. All right, so to start off with the AdoptaStream program, you need to know a little more about it. The AdoptaStream program is a statewide volunteer water quality monitoring program. It is co-led by South Carolina DHEC and Clemson Center for Watershed Excellence. Through that partnership, we help coordinate volunteers all across the state. We have volunteers that focus on freshwater wadable streams, tidal saltwaters, and then we also have volunteers that specifically look at our macroinvertebrate communities, which we'll be talking about today. The volunteer water quality monitoring program is free, so people just attend workshop and they get certified and they're able to generate very valuable data that can be used by anyone with internet access. So it's pretty cool. It's a fun way to get outdoors, contribute to citizen science, sample together because it's a lot more fun that way, and then ultimately generate data that can be used to protect and restore our streams. Through the volunteer monitoring program here in South Carolina, there's several positive outcomes that come with generating this data. In short, volunteers, whether they ever actually adopt a site itself, they at least get to learn about water quality, non-point source pollution, and just have a greater awareness of water quality in general. They also learn about how data can be used and collected. So we teach a specific protocol that's EPA approved, where if our volunteers follow that protocol, that data is of high quality and of reliable in many ways for many uses. It also really helps encourage partnerships. So the whole goal of this program is basically start as a grassroots initiative. So get all the volunteers involved, get them trained, help them spread the word with the data, and then really it becomes something that spreads like wildfire, because once you start talking about the data, then people can come up with plans to protect and restore our streams, and then funding can be found and things just end up being much better for our aquatic communities because we have that data in the first place and those partnerships. And then last but not least, the goal of the program is to collect long-term baseline data. So we're looking for volunteers that are interested in not only going out and sampling once, but many more times after that, and ultimately contributing to a data set that helps us see historical trends or trends over time. And on some cases become success stories through catching problems. So like I said, volunteers just attend a free workshop. They get to pick what stream they want to adopt, whether on private property, or they can work with local groups to select a public space. And then if you're sampling for macroinvertebrates, we've now updated the protocol to where you are sampling 2 times a year. And with our chemical, bacteria, and tidal monitoring programs, we ask our volunteers to sample monthly. So it's a relatively low time commitment and it's meant to be enjoyable. And for those of you that want more than once a month or twice a year, we just encourage you to adopt more than one site. So speaking of sites, this is a look at, and as of 2021 or the end of 2021, the sites that we have across South Carolina. Lots of activity in the upstate and along the coast. The blue pins are the most recently sampled, and then the red are considered historical sites. You can see that we have a lot of sites adopted, but we can always help fill in those gaps in between those pins. So going back to our topic for today on macroinvertebrates, for those of you that have maybe never heard that term, it's nice to know a little more about them. So macroinvertebrates, in short, is a fancy word for aquatic insects. Macroinvertebrates lack a backbone. They're usually able to be seen with the naked eye, and they come in a variety of shapes and sizes. So our macroinvertebrate workshops focus on helping you learn 20 different aquatic macroinvertebrates, and this is just a subset of what you can learn at these workshops. However, the focus of this webinar is to not just focus on what we teach in our program, but all the information that's out there and what we can learn from these marvelous organisms. So the reason both the South Carolina AdoptaStream program and DHEC focuses on macroinvertebrate sampling is because they're excellent indicators of water quality. They're not very mobile, so if anything is ever altered with the habitat, water quality, status, or if there's a pollution event, they can't swim downstream like fish can or leave the area. They're also really easy to collect. If you have tweezers, an ice cube tray, and a net, they can be caught relatively easily. And then the key factor for why we use them as water quality indicators is different macroinvertebrates, so different aquatic insects, have different levels of tolerance to pollution. So some are very sensitive, where just a little bit of pollution or a little bit change in habitat, they're gone, they're wiped out. And then others can live in really hot, stagnant puddle and be perfectly happy, and they're not sensitive to pollution at all, or at least as much as other ones are. They're also good for continuous monitoring, so where we sample twice a year for these macroinvertebrates, it's something where we can go back to the same site and relatively in the same spot and get a score for throughout the year and for many years to come. It's also relatively inexpensive. Ice cube trays and tweezers are fairly cheap. It's really if you can afford the cost of the net or borrow one of our kits through the South Carolina AdoptaStream program, you're good to go. And they're also relatively easy to identify. If you can give us a little bit of patience and a little part of your brain at a workshop, this is something where 100% of the people that come to our workshops leave having a good understanding of what to look for. They might not know every bug, but we teach them to identify what we call aquatic insect morphology. So we look at tails and gills and antennas and overall shape and color. And we basically piece together all the clues to identify what organism we're looking at. And then one of the last things, but one of my favorite things, is that there's no chemicals needed. There's no waste. There's no consumables that you can go out, collect the organisms, and then also put them back after you're done identifying them, and then come to your water quality score and be able to use that data for multiple different purposes. One of my favorite ways to introduce macroinvertebrates to especially people that maybe go, ooh, I didn't know there were bugs in our streams, is to introduce them to the adult version of these macroinvertebrates. These macroinvertebrates, a lot of them are eggs, hatch into either larvae or nymphs, and then emerge and hatch and fly away. So if you can teach people that, oh, if you've seen a dragonfly before, or a mayfly, or a black fly, which most people have, and you go, yeah, their life cycle starts out underneath the water in our streams, it's kind of a neat, mind-blowing introduction to how incredible the world is, especially with our aquatic streams. Another personal favorite of mine on this slide is the crane fly. Is especially, I think it's in the fall when you see these big mosquito-like insects bouncing on your porch lights. People are sometimes annoyed by them, or they think they bite, which they don't. And it's funny to realize that a relatively big, dainty bug comes from a plump-looking aquatic caterpillar-like insect from the beginning stages of its life cycle. So as we talk about some of the macroinvertebrates today, I keep referencing their sensitivity to pollution. So if anyone's new to that, this slide helps explain that. So basically group 1 is the most sensitive, group 2 is in between, and then group 3 is the most tolerant to pollution. Different states and different programs break this up in different ways. So some have 4 groups. In South Carolina AdoptaStream, we have 3 groups. And then there's more aquatic species than pictured on this screen, but it gives you an idea that with the water quality score I keep mentioning, essentially group 1, which is the most sensitive, gets the highest score, so they would receive 3 points. Group 2 gets 2 points, and then that last group on the bottom would only receive 1 group, and the higher the score, the better in our program. So speaking of scores, we don't just look at the number, but we teach our volunteers to focus on the diversity of what can be found. So, and not necessarily the abundance. So what the abundance is, and an example I can give you is you may go to a stream and you find 100 black fly larvae. Just because there's 100 of them and they're so numerous, but there's nothing else present, that's where you're looking at the abundance of the species and not the diversity. For high quality or good quality waters, we want to see a good diversity of it. So we want to see mayflies and caddisflies and ripple beetles and a variety of each and in good numbers each. We just don't want to see one or two species, because that can indicate we might have either threats of pollution or poor habitat. That we really want to focus on finding the most diverse and variety of macroinvertebrates for each kind. All right, so here's the hook of the presentation, and essentially why are macroinvertebrates marvelous. So this is actually the video that convinced me that macroinvertebrates are cool. I had no idea that many of these insects I grew up seeing around the rivers had an aquatic version of themselves as part of their life cycle. Now, this is going to play again in slow motion here, but what you're looking at is a dragonfly nymph, and they're actually the lions and tigers of the aquatic world. And if you notice there, the mouth part comes out from under the dragonfly nymph, unhinges and grabs its prey, and that's how it feeds. So in one video alone, it's especially with kids, if you're working as a teacher or you're in outreach, showing them videos and not just saying that these aquatic insects exist and they're beneficial, but that there's a whole underworld that many people don't know about. This is a great video to look at. So here, let me get to the next slide. All right, so on the topic of dragonflies, just like the video I just showed you, this is a dragonfly's life cycle. And where I'm talking about they hatch and they emerge, and they can actually live underwater for, depending on the species, 1 to 5 years. And that's what makes them a really good water quality indicator, because their life cycles are just long enough that they can really take in and be affected by their surroundings. So this type of, I'm getting ahead of myself, sorry. One thing I want to point out is some of the terminology that we use in the macroinvertebrate world. You'll see that sometimes we call macroinvertebrates either larvae or nymphs. And this is something that we don't have time to teach in our workshop, but I think is pretty cool. Essentially, depending on if you call them a nymph or a larva, is an indicator of the type of life cycle they undergo. So the example on the left, which is a form of incomplete metamorphosis, and the example is a mayfly. As mayflies age underwater, they actually go through a series of bigger and bigger sizes. So I believe the term would be molting. And they basically end up looking similar to their adult. Whereas other macroinvertebrates that are called larvae have a cycle that's called complete metamorphosis. And theirs is similar, and if you're scientific, don't get onto me for saying this, but it's similar to butterfly cycles, because it goes through an egg, then a larva, and it almost has a cocoon-like stage, and then it will emerge as an adult and fly away. So that's just a fun fact for if you're wondering why some are named one way versus another, it's because of their life cycle. Now, another thing that's really unique with macroinvertebrates is the way they move. So in a workshop, we teach you to identify based on the absence or presence of tails and gills and antenna. But another thing to keep in mind is the way they move. For instance, we have things like the water penny that cling to rocks. And so if you don't have rocks in your stream, the likelihood of you finding a water penny is pretty rare. Whereas the damselflies that are climbers, you'll notice that you most often find them along areas of vegetation, because in order for them to emerge and hatch, they like to climb up the vegetation, they hatch, they dry out, and they fly away. So something to keep in mind, you can have the cleanest waters, but if you don't have the right habitat, you might not find certain types of macroinvertebrates in your stream. Another thing to keep in mind is their feeding habits. Not many people realize that even though there's different types of macroinvertebrates, they all have their different roles within their own ecosystem. One of my favorites is the first one there that are filter feeders, and it's caddisflies that actually cast sticky nets. So even if you're at a time of the season where the caddisflies have emerged and flown away, you can sometimes still pick up rocks and they'll have little silk nets on them, and those are left behind from the caddisflies that created them. Then you also have shredders. Some just shred and eat it. Others use their shredding power to build cases, like a different type of caddisfly there on the bottom right. Then you also have scrapers that like to cling to the rocks and scrape off all the goodies that are on them. You have piercers, and then some of the less lovely versions of macroinvertebrates. You have your predators, like your dragonflies and your hellgrammites or Dobson flies. And then lastly, your lovely parasites, like your aquatic worms, some aquatic worms, and leeches. So the rest of the webinar now is what can be done or what you have resources for in order to help you better with identification of macroinvertebrates. This is something that you basically use it or you lose it. If you're not actively working on either quizzing yourself with the bugs or going out with friends when they sample, if you're only sampling once or twice a year, it really helps to have additional tools. Now, my first tip with macroinvertebrate ID is a little bit of a joke. You do need good eyesight. With macroinvertebrates being the bottom of the food chain, evolution has served them well with them blending in and them being able to hide in their habitats very well. So with this slide here, depending on if you notice there's a few macroinvertebrates, there's actually more than a few. These are all some snails underneath the water here. And it really helps to have good lighting, which is one of the tips I wanted to point out with this, is if maybe you're in a forested stream where it's really shady in the morning, it might help by going out in the afternoon or bringing some sort of light or magnifier, and that can really help you with identification. Now, this image and the next image is from macroinvertebrates.org, but this is a perfect example of why in our workshop we don't teach you every single macroinvertebrate you're ever going to find, but teach you the general shapes and characteristics, because every insect that you see on the screen is categorized as a stonefly. And that's why at the workshop we teach you to look for two tails, they look X-shaped, and then there's no gills on the abdomens. And then also they all have wing pads. So I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but behind the heads, you'll notice something in common, that these have wing pads, and that's what we would characterize as or help identify as stoneflies. Now that gets harder for some organisms than others, such as mayflies, is there even more different shapes and colors, and although most have three tails, you'll come to find out some have two tails. So the more you sample, the more you have to be aware of what's out there, whether it's common or uncommon. Now, another tool that you can use, and we do have one of these available in our handbook, which is the version on the right, are macroinvertebrate guides. These field guides can either be picture-based or word-based. Some of them have size references. Some of them just show one version of the aquatic insect. And then you'll also see that there's other keys out there that are kind of a combination of the both. And this is a really good example of if you kind of know what it is, but you need to rule out certain other lookalikes. If you start by looking, are there shells present? How many legs? How many tails? It can quickly get you down to what you could be looking at. but sometimes you need to take it a step further. So another key that we offer, and this again is in our macroinvertebrate handbook. So maybe you've attended a workshop a year or two ago and lost one. I'm happy to either mail you one, or you can find a digital version on our website. And with this guide, you can actually go line by line. So if we start at 1A, you look if it has hardened legs with joints, and you'd skip down to number 2, and you would basically, you're looking yes or no. So after 1A, if you did not have hard legs with joints, but it matches 1B, then you skip all the way down to 13, and that's the type of guide that gets really detailed and is specific to our program. Now, if you are really into macroinvertebrates and what we teach you at a workshop just does not answer all the questions you've ever had about them, there's a fantastic website called macroinvertebrates.org. I'm going to try to show it to you here. You'll have to speak up if you guys can't see it. So hopefully it's showing a picture of a caddisfly here. But at macroinvertebrates.org, you can basically get high-def pictures of every macroinvertebrate that you could find in the eastern portion of North America. And what's interesting with these is, I guess we're not in caddisflies. We'll show you some mayflies here, is that you can really start to see the similarities between different organisms and be thankful that we only have to ID ours down to the general order of mayfly and not go all the way down to individual species, because then you would need a microscope and you would need a much longer workshop than we currently offer. So that's really neat. Another thing that's neat about macroinvertebrates.org is some of the keys that I was just showing you on the presentation is they have a key that's clickable. So you still can go through, and if it has legs or tails or gills, and if you get down and you think it's a mayfly, you can click on that mayfly and it breaks it down to all the different types, and you can keep going in deeper, and it will tell you all the key characteristics of what you would do to confirm that that's what it is. And another cool feature is that you can see dorsal and ventral, so top and bottom sides of some of these insects. And then you can also get general overviews and stats on what they look like and go from there. And then I want to show you one last thing. The other helpful thing with macroinvertebrates.org is that they have a quiz. Now, this is a hard version of quizzes if you're a beginner, because a lot of the ones that pull up are maybe ones that we don't often see in South Carolina, but essentially it'll give you an insect. You can flip it around, you can look at it, you can say what it is, and if you're right, you can check it and it'll tell you you're right. You can go to the next one, and if you're like, South Carolina AdoptaStream doesn't teach me my beetles, you can just guess and it will tell you it's wrong and tell you what it actually is. So those are just some unique tools that if you do want to take a deeper dive, I highly recommend going to macroinvertebrates.org. Another, I guess, newer technology form than just traditional paper keys is to use phone applications, so phone apps. These are all free. I have them on an Android, so I apologize if any of these don't work on iPhones. But this Pocket Macros is basically macroinvertebrates.org, but a user-friendly phone version. And again, it has more macros than we teach, but can really help you identify some of the unusual beetles or less common macroinvertebrates that you would find. Another app, and this is one of my personal favorites, is the Creek Critters app, and it's kind of an in-between. I believe it has a few extra, no, not this one. Yeah, this one has a few extra aquatic insects in their list, but what's nice about it is theirs actually creates stream health reports that you can save to your phone. So we still want you to enter the data into our database, but this is a bigger project outside of our state where you can contribute data to their program as well. And it not only helps you identify it, but helps you generate a report with a location that other people then can see what you found on your visit. Then the last app that I would like to show you is called Aquabugs. And this one's my favorite as far as the most simple. It has the 20 aquatic insects that we teach in our program and really simplifies it down to what's most obvious on the macroinvertebrate is its legs, its body shape or tail. Then you click what it looks like, and then it pops up a little more about it with a photo, which is nice. Then last but not least, if you're not a technology person, but you still want to take a deeper dive, I jokingly call this the Bug Bible. This is, I think it's a 2-inch wide textbook that really takes a deeper dive into the habits of macroinvertebrates, the seasons that you can see them in. It has full color photos, and what's really nice is if you want to identify your macroinvertebrates down to species, this will teach you how to count the hairs between their toes, the lines on their chin, and all sorts of fun stuff you never knew existed on aquatic insects. All right, so now going into just some tips on macro collection in general. These should apply whether you're certified or not. But one of the biggest rookie mistakes that I see volunteers do when they go out to the stream is that when they go to pick up their kick net, is that they don't pick it up at the same time as the person in the back, and they either accidentally dump all the water off the front, or the person picking up the bottom dumps all the water off the back. So go nice and slow. The whole idea of the kick net is that as you kick the ground and the macroinvertebrates try to swim away, the current pushes them into the net and then they cling to the net. So you want to lift it nice and slow and make sure you don't lose any macroinvertebrates. Another important thing to note is if you are sampling in a group, which I highly recommend because it makes it go a lot faster, make sure you're sampling in an upstream moving direction. So you don't want to walk through where you could be sampling. So if you're sampling all from the same riffle, start at the lowest end of it, so the downstream end, take your sample, and then work your way upstream so you're not disturbing the habitat and altering the results that you could be getting. And this goes same with if you're teaching or if you're a teacher doing this. As soon as the kids see the stream and you say, go get the bugs, they go all over. And I highly recommend you say, let's start with vegetative margins. Let's start with leaf packs and give them a habitat to stick to, and that will help not disturb it as much. Another tip I'd like to give is with collecting, if you get any sensitive organisms like salamanders or mussels, make note on your data sheet that you found them, but get them back in the water. And then same with being aware of your surroundings of the order you're sampling your nets in, or the habitat. Make sure you don't put it somewhere that you plan on stepping into in just a minute. Another tip that I would like to give is if you are sampling in the heat of summer and maybe you're moving slow or you're new at volunteering and your net starts to get dry, since these are aquatic organisms and it should make sense, if the net gets dry, they stop wiggling around and they get a lot harder to see and find. So it helps to have a water bottle or a small bucket, and if you keep getting your net wet, they'll start wiggling around again, so you can help get them from the net into the ice cube tray in order to count. Another tip is laminating your keys and data sheets. This helps prevent them from getting wet and helps you be able to reuse them and us have less waste overall. So if you need a laminated guide and don't have a way of doing that, let me know and I will see how I can help. Another tip is if you can get a wider, bigger white pan, that will really help. you be able to identify the movement of the bugs and be able to capture them versus having a deeper, smaller pan. A lot of people will order photo trays that are used in the hobby for photography, and they have a specific name and it's escaping me. But again, the bigger, more shallow you can have the water on a white background, the easier the bugs are going to be to collect. Now, again, if you're sampling in the summer and you notice the heat is raising the temperature of your water, your macroinvertebrates are likely going to get stressed out and have harder time consuming the oxygen from the warmer water. So if you are sampling and you just have a lot to look at, try to identify one tray at a time and dump them back in the water as you go. That way you're not holding them all hostage until the very end and stressing them out too bad. So one thing a way you can visually see if the organism is pushing oxygen over their gills is we joke that sometimes the stoneflies will do push-ups, and that's them trying to basically breathe better underwater, which is, it's kind of neat to see. I'd say in several of my workshops alone, we've seen this as groups. This is also a good example on the stoneflies. Sometimes we teach that they have hairy armpits, so they're X-shaped, no gills on the abdomen, but they have hairy armpits as an identifier. All right, and then I think we're coming up on one of the last tips is if you notice in this photo, this volunteer is checking every leaf, which is a very good tip because the macroinvertebrates like to cling to the leaves. She's dumping them on the ground, which sometimes means they get left on the ground instead of put back in the stream. So I highly recommend that you use 2 buckets and you put them back in some stream water and get them back in the stream so they can be used as habitat versus just decomposing on land. And that way, if you miss any macroinvertebrates, you're not drying them out unintentionally. All right, so a little bit of a plug for AdoptaStream macroinvertebrates. At our workshops, we basically give you examples and give you everything you need to know to come up with these water quality scores. So essentially, we would teach you the macroinvertebrates that you see on this slide, and by the end of the workshop, you would be able to tell us that this has a score. I think this one was of 28, and that it's actually an excellent water quality rating, which makes sense because you see mayflies, riffle beetles, stoneflies, water pennies. Those are all ones that get the 3 points in their score. So when I'm talking about points, this is actually a screenshot from the data sheets with South Carolina AdoptaStream. And all the ones on the left in the sensitive group, they receive 3 points. The ones in the middle receive 2 points. And then the ones on the right only receive 1 point. And then what you would do essentially is you multiply that out. So even if you found just 1 in any of those categories, you would add those up, multiply it out, and come to your water quality score. And then it's also nice to know any invasives, any salamanders, any fish present. And that's very, very valuable information. Now, due to time, I initially thought I would be covering a little more DHEC material and what their macroinvertebrate program looks like compared to ours. But then I decided that that could be a whole nother webinar and a future potential topic. But if you would like us to do that, I'd love to hear about it in the chat. So I know that there's people that would be interested in signing up for it. As far as DHEC sampling goes, it's slightly different than what we do in South Carolina AdoptaStream, but definitely just as valuable, or if not more valuable. They sample all across the state. This is a screenshot from a very valuable tool that DHEC provides called DHEC, or South Carolina DHEC's Watershed Atlas. I'll post a link to it at the end. But this shows all the stations that we've ever sampled macroinvertebrates at across the state. And then it also has 90 other different data layers of just DHEC programs and permits that you can explore as well. Now, the one thing I wanted to show you from what DHEC does versus what AdoptaStream does, obviously I explained how we basically score ours at 3, 2, and 1 point each. Well, with DHEC, they have pages and pages of this, and they don't just stop at the order. They sometimes go 1, if not 2 steps further than we do to identify the either family or species. And just to give reference, all of these, when you see the phylum name over on the left, this is a whole sheet of just worms. And we basically lump all of our worms together and give them 1 score. But on the right, you'll notice different worms have different tolerance values, is what TV stands for. So instead of essentially averaging them like we do in South Carolina, DHEC's able to get a much higher level of identification and a much stricter score at the state level than we do at the volunteer level. So they're having to identify them. When I wasn't joking when I said by the hairs on their chin and number of toes they have, that's how they get down to the level that they have to for our state permits and requirements. All right, and then final section here, and then I'll take questions at the end. And this is cheesy, I know, but AdoptaStream's just as marvelous as our macroinvertebrates. And I just want to give you some extra details on it. But essentially, we offer macroinvertebrate workshops, freshwater workshops, which is your chemical and bacteria monitoring, and then also tidal saltwater monitoring, which launched last summer. And then as a teaser, we do have a lake monitoring program in the works, which is really exciting. So if you're interested in that, please reach out because I'd love to hear what you would like to see, or if you would be interested in partnering or helping us find support for that program. And then last but not least, this program is open to anyone. It tends to be adults. However, we do have some high schoolers and a handful of middle schoolers that have completed the program. We do gear it towards people that have the time commitment to do it and the ability to come to a workshop, but that doesn't mean the data can't be used, or we'll have a curriculum coming out soon that you can't use parts of the program in different ways. Now, speaking of data, all of our data can be found from our database by going to our website at scadoptastream.org. There's a database tab on the left as far as, and a bunch of resources, upcoming events and whatnot. We do have a lot of data. We have close to 100 sites that have specifically macroinvertebrate data. We have over 4,000 sampling events, and because volunteers have monitored, we've actually had some success stories where just by volunteers being out and about, they were able to help us identify broken sewer lines, broken water lines, sediment issues, and it's all helped us learn more and do more for our streams. And then for those of you that maybe are interested in the data for research purposes, or maybe you want to use it as part of grants and other things, it can all be copy and pasted from our database, or there's even a few export buttons where you can download it straight into Excel. These are some screenshots directly from our database. So we have advanced queries, interactive maps, photos, interactive graphs, and it's all very, very helpful if you're looking to get to know a stream. Now, data uses is really unlimited, but something that's very important to point out is that our data is not regulatory in nature. It does follow an EPA-approved co-op, which means it's of high-quality data. However, it's not referenced at the regulatory level. So if you are wanting to join this program because you're mad at your neighbor or mad at a company and you want to get them in trouble, this is not the goal of the program. The goal of the program is to really establish that baseline data, that long-term data, use it for screening for unexpected problems, and then mainly for educational uses too. It can also be referenced in by grants. I will be posting about 2 grants. I'll share the links. One is for our watershed-based plans through the 319 program, and then there's also a grant open now for teachers only, called the Champions of the Environment grant through DHEC too. So keep an eye out in the chat for that. And then really, like I said, there's so many ways that this can be used for good, and there's so many ways that you can either get involved and help us too. So we need more volunteers, we need more trainers, we need help identifying kit sponsors, because we can train people all across the state, but if they don't have the monitoring supplies to work with, then we won't have the data. And then even if you don't want to become a certified volunteer, I can help connect you with our local partners and our local volunteers that you can just go out and sample with them and see what it's like for yourself. Now, shameless plug, follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram. You can sign up for our e-newsletter on the first page of our website, which is what that arrow is pointing to. And then also on our website is upcoming workshops, videos. Speaking of upcoming workshops, if you're a certified volunteer, we'd love for you to come out to our volunteer appreciation event in September. It's at Lake Murray at Sierra Hylton State Park. And then if you're not a volunteer, I'd love to invite you to one of these upcoming workshops, which would be in Greer, Spartanburg. I'll also be adding one in Fort Mill soon, and Columbia as well. But you can always email me and I can add you to my wait list or get you connected with your local trainer if you're interested in workshops. And then that's really it. I'm glad you stuck with me this long and hopefully at least learned one cool thing about macroinvertebrates, or decided that you'd love to join the program, and hopefully I can meet you at a future workshop. So that's my information. I'll give you just a moment. I can put it in the chat as well. But thank you, and I'll go over to the chat now to see if I have any questions.
Sierra, there are some questions in the Q&A tab. Emily and I have answered a few of them, but
Perfect.
there's still some unanswered ones.
All right, well, give me 10 seconds here to get those links in the chat, so in case anyone needs to hop off. All right, so everyone should be able to see links to our website, our database, that interactive mapping tool called the Watershed Atlas. I also posted DHEC's protocol for how they do macros, and then the 2 grants for watershed-based plans and the Teachers Only Champions of the Environment grant. All right, so I guess I'm going to start from the top. I'm not sure I can see what was answered or not.
There's a button for answered.
Okay, so it's just open ones.
Yeah.
All right.
Answered, you can see the ones that Emily and I took a stab at already.
Perfect.
Some of them you covered to some extent later on in the presentation.
Okay, well, I'm going to start with the first question here. The question is, what techniques would you suggest for macroinvertebrate sampling in fast-flowing rivers? Now, I'm going to assume by fast-flowing rivers, you mean maybe deeper, bigger rivers. Our protocol for South Carolina AdoptaStream is strictly for wadable streams. So we want it to be several inches deep, preferably 5 or 6 inches deep, so you can get a clean sample, and then have enough flow getting into your nets. But once it becomes past wadable, it's very hard to get down and get all the habitats that match our protocol. DHEC does have a protocol for sampling big rivers. I'm not sure if it's in that SOP that I attached, but that's something that if you email, I can track down from them and would be happy to share. Now we've got some comments with safety. Watch out for snakes out there. We love our snakes just as much as we love our macros, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Looks like someone likes the idea of a presentation about what DHEC specifically does with macros, so I'll try to put in the request for that. And then we got some thank yous. And then we've got a question. There's a teacher at a school in Johns Island that wants to know if there's any good references or sources for stagnant freshwater areas. There are macroinvertebrate methods for sampling in ponds that I know of, where you can essentially sink some leaf packs and rocks in like a wire crate, and then you can pull it up and sample what crawled in there after a specific amount of time at a specific depth. But as far as through our program goes, we don't have any specific protocol that would match that type of habitat. All right, so I think that's all the ones I can see from my end. If there's any other questions, now's the time to put them in the chat. Otherwise, thank you so much for attending. It's been great to see this many people jump on one of our webinars. It will be recorded, so if you have a friend or coworker that would like to see it, I'm not sure how we'll be sharing it, but you can always reach out and I will get that recording out as soon as I can.
Sierra, if you can, you might want to go to the Answered tab and look at the questions and responses that are in there, because everybody's chat's been disabled. So chat.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. All right. So with the answered questions, the first one is who does the training for volunteers and who trains the trainers? So that's a mixture between our program coordinators. So we have a state team, which is, we have a couple of people in DHEC and then also Clemson Center for Watershed Excellence. And then our trainers basically become eligible to be trainers after they've been with the program and been actively sampling for a year. And they go through a train the trainer workshop where we teach them and make sure they are tested on all of the protocol and that they know all of the tools and resources to teach most effectively. And then the second part of that question is how often do volunteers and trainers need to be retrained and recertified? That's a great question, William. So we make everyone be recertified annually, both our volunteers and our trainers. That just to help keep up our quality control. And then if we make any program changes, we can have everyone updated. Our volunteers do have to attend the first one in person, and then they can recertify online after that. And then our trainers, we get together at least once a year to make sure everyone's up to date on their certification.
The 25-meter reel. The Bluetooth on that I keep with my CPAP stuff. I just wanted to
Oh, that's nice.
I'm not sure where, Dave, do you still have your,
Good.
there's sound coming from someone.
I'm not even going.
Pardon?
There's some background sound coming from someone.
Well, I can turn off my mic.
Thank you. All right, another question is, have you all compared the scores from your assessments and how they match up with our aquatic sciences program? I assume at DHEC is what he's referencing. To my knowledge, that hasn't been done yet, but that's something that would be very interesting to do in the future. All righty, well, that's all I see on my end. And again, thank you for coming, and I hopefully will either get to see your data come rolling in or meet you all at a future workshop. Have a good day, everybody.